Couple of episodes into the show, and you've got to wonder which direction the writers are going to take with regards to the character Cyril. And even though his storyline has been moving slower compared to the other characters, the writers are actually quite cleverly laying down the groundwork for his character to climb the ranks of the imperial machine. And when putting all these clues and hints together, I get the feeling that we will see Cyril become an ISB agent before the end of the season. In the most recent episode, we get the best and clearest clue as to why this might happen, and it has everything to do with his fashion sense. In the beginning of the episode, we see Cyril have a conversation with his mother, and his mother basically nitpicks and challenges him about his fashion sense.
What is it that you hear my caller saying?
Look at me. I don't believe in myself. I am desperate for approval.
But specifically, she makes note of his high collar, which he apparently had tailor-made by himself. This was also the case with his preox uniform, which he specifically modified for a much smarter, fitter look.
Have you modified your uniform?
Perhaps slightly. Pockets piping and some light tailoring.
But while Cyril's intentions for modifying his clothing aren't explicitly made known, his mother interprets these changes pretty harshly, interpreting it as a lack of confidence, self-esteem, and a desperate need for approval, all of which may be partially true. However, what is interesting isn't so much what his mother says, but what is implied in the following scene. As we cut away from Cyril and his mother's discussion, we focus on Dedra getting herself ready for a big meeting. She gets dressed and picks up all her belongings, but notice that in the quick shots that we get of her dressing herself, most of the shots are fixated on her collar, the high collar that all Imperials wear to be precise. So what if, unlike what Cyril's mother says about the high collar, Cyril's choice to tailor-make his clothing to include such elements is, in reality, to model himself after the Imperials? What it might really suggest is that deep down, Cyril has a fascination for the Imperial military and really just wants to be like one of them. And we've seen clues to Cyril's fascination with the Empire elsewhere besides clothing. In a previous episode, we briefly saw clone trooper figurines in his room, and in the most recent episode, we see him take an immediate interest in the rebel attack on Aldhani. This fascination with the Imperial military also explains why he chose the corporate security forces as a career path in the first place. Perhaps that inner childhood fascination in him drove him to sign up, and we see this in the overeagerness he displays on the job. On top of that, the previous episode made it pretty clear that he has every intention and motivation to try and catch Cassian. We have seen him obsessing over Cassian's hologram in his room, probably dreaming of revenge for the troubles Andor has caused him. But while his character motivations are all there, it doesn't really give us a clue as to how he might join the ISB. But what the recent episode did do is let us know how the ISB will get to him. In episode 7, we get a great scene that demonstrates the intricacies of ISB politics, in which Blevin accuses Dedra for circumventing proper procedures and authorities by accessing the data records on Ferrix. And while Blevin tries his best to call out Dedra in front of their superiors in hopes of getting her reprimanded, the whole plan backfires. Instead of Dedra getting reprimanded, she gets praised by Pendergast. In fact, she gets rewarded with the entire Morlana sector, which just so happens to include the former Preox planet and Ferrix itself. So what does this mean down the line? Well, it's very likely in the next episode Dedra will begin to try and uncover rebel activity, and through this process figure out Cassian's involvement, all of which would lead back to Cyril as he was the one who managed to track down Cassian in the first place. So as part of the investigation, and unlike Blevin who simply released Cyril, Dedra will most likely want to interrogate him to get more information. After all, Cyril is a key witness to rebel activity. This also means that it would put Cyril right at the heart of ISB operations, potentially giving him a chance to be a part of the operation itself, possibly giving him the opportunity to sign up as an ISB agent or operative. But while these circumstances would put Cyril in direct contact with the ISB and the opportunity to join them, it isn't necessarily guaranteed. The ISB have a very strong vetting process and tend to only hire the smartest and brightest among the Imperial military. This was the case with Dedra, who was recommended to the ISB, as Pendergast points out in an earlier episode.
You're supposed to be more competent and tucked away. That's why you're here. That's why we're bringing in officers like you.
So in order for Cyril to qualify, you would have to have some qualifications in the first place, as well as the competence. This might be a bit difficult as he does come from outside the Imperial system, being a former private security officer, but what he might just have is competence. Now, it would be easy to assume that Cyril was simply an incompetent cop who got in way over his head, and the results would certainly suggest this, as he does lead a group of soldiers, half of which would end up dead, and a failure of an operation that caused the preox to lose control over the Morlana sector. It really is a failure of epic proportions, especially when it comes to the fieldwork. However, I actually don't think he's that incompetent. Sure, maybe a little inexperienced when it comes to the fieldwork, but he's actually quite competent when it comes to the forensic side of things. If you go back to the first 2 episodes, Cyril actually pretty methodically works out that Cassian is the culprit and is able to identify his location. Given the limited resources and information at his disposal, Cyril works pretty well to retrace Cassian's step and identify Cassian's comings and goings. So all things considered, he isn't exactly that incompetent. For the most part, Cyril does everything right, putting all the pieces together and then finally a team to capture Cassian. He is able to corroborate the evidence with key witnesses and use readily available data to detect movement patterns. He also cleverly leverages the use of the public to flush Cassian out, all of which are signs of ISB competent qualities and bears tons of resemblance to the work that Dedra does. Throughout all the moments that we got with Dedra, most of her work, besides navigating Imperial politics, has been trying to piece together different bits of information and collect data to better understand rebel movement and activity. In fact, data analysis is such a crucial component, which is why Dedra is obsessed with getting her hands on the Ferrex data in the first place. So really, what Cyril has demonstrated so far is the ability to comprehend the work in that sort of environment. When it comes to catching Cassian, the only thing which he could not take into account was Luthen's involvement, who, let's be honest, is the only reason why Cassian was able to escape in the first place. And really, given the evidence uncovered, who could really predict that? Without Luthen's involvement, I have a very good feeling that Cyril would have been able to catch Cassian, and who knows, might even have gotten some positive attention from the Empire. So with the right motivation, circumstance, and hopefully competence, the show does seem to be setting up Cyril's involvement and eventual joining of the ISB, something which I think would be a better fit for Cyril's character rather than a desk job at the Bureau of Standards. I mean, who knows, maybe Uncle Harlow has more pull and might just be able to get him into the ISB as well. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.